Hello, and you're very welcome. It is another week and another episode of the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast with me, Karen Maloney. This week, I was joined by Edel Moylan, and Edel has a master's in science in family therapy. She trained in the Galway Rape Crisis Centre and has a diploma in biodynamic massage and psychotherapy. She's done over 6 years of training as a family constellations or family systems facilitator, and she's worked for over 25 years in private practice as a counsellor and has trained in several other healing modalities, including Reiki, Sekim, vortex healing, transformational cellular healing, touch for health, among many others. Her absolute passion is soul work and her approach is eclectic. She is also trained in meditation and she helps people access their true nature, which she says was never or could ever be broken. My conversation with Edel centred around her work as a family constellations facilitator, which is truly fascinating work. She explains how family entanglements can play in our daily lives, how we carry entanglements and issues from generations past that we may not even be aware of or acknowledge. And in order to undertake this work, we don't need to know any history or anything. And it's just a really fascinating conversation. And for me, again, just highlighted a deeper understanding and comprehension of how everything is so interconnected. And it's so beautiful how she explains as well that everything is always of pure love. So a fascinating conversation, and in the end we're left with a lovely nugget of life advice about surrendering. So make sure you stay tuned. So Edel, you're very welcome to today's show, and I'm so excited that you're joining me. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. A pleasure, Karen.
Hope you're looking forward to our conversation today. We'll see where it flows and what direction it goes. You're a counsellor. You've been a counsellor for over 25 years, and you also are a family systems and constellations facilitator. And I had the pleasure of joining one of your workshops recently, and it really is fascinating work. So maybe first, as a start point, if you can mention a little bit about your work and, explain maybe a little bit about the family systems work and the constellations.
Well, on my own journey, I discovered family constellations about just over 10 years ago, Karen. And prior to that, I've been training in so many modalities myself, including biodynamic massage and psychotherapy. So I trained in body work and Shen therapy, loads of different therapies. And I was always trying to heal myself and support other people en route. And as I said, 10 years ago, I happened on my first family constellation workshop. And it literally blew my mind, which needed blowing, but it really very gently brought me to my knees. Everything that I'd been going to psychotherapy myself for years, and one time I sat down and I'd done over 40 modalities on my own journey, trying to heal and come back into my body through my own traumas. But my very first constellation, I was gobsmacked, because all the things that I was crawling about over the years in therapy, just the bones of it were just made or manifested around me in the constellation. So I knew I wasn't mad or losing my mind. It opened something in me, and it began to help me come out of the story and out of the total identity with my mind. Alongside that, then I started to do meditation, and those two combined gradually got me back to safety and began the journey of coming back into my body. Even though I'd been on that journey, I've been on it for 30 years. But it was only in the last, I suppose, 10 years that I began to see real shifts. And Family Constellations doesn't go into the mind. It doesn't go into the level of story. It sticks with the bare bones of any issue. We'll say they're not the facilitator isn't interested in I said and she said and what happened, and there's no points of view about a person. Yeah. There's no personality taken on board or anything like that. So it's just facts. It's about where fate knocked your system, knocked your family sideways. Everybody has been knocked sideways by fate. It could be early deaths and emigration, that kind of stuff. Stillbirths, abortions, miscarriages, injustices, just the stuff of life's hardships. So you don't have to go into any big historical story, or even if you don't know much or you just have a sensation in your body, you can go with that. You don't have to have, as I said, a whole load of stuff analysed and prepared or anything like that, which is such a blessing. And then somebody, depending on if you're going up to do a constellation, depending on what you're talking about, the facilitator might ask you to pick 2 or 3 people. We'll say it could be yourself and your partner and child, or it could be your parents and a sibling, or it depends. As I said, every time is different. But nobody in the room in the workshop has heard a story, that so-and-so was a real hard person, so they don't have any concepts in their mind about this person's personality that they're representing. And they've no story to go on, just the bare facts. And lo and behold, there's an informing field within the constellation. And the representatives almost get a kind of a download in their body, a kind of an awareness of how they're feeling or how they might respond to somebody else in the field beside them, somebody else that's constellated, a sister or a brother or a father, mother, whatever. And it becomes apparent where there are entanglements in the system which block the flow of love. It's like having a chink in the love hose. Yeah. So I unchink. I help. Once that's manifested, the facilitator can help to unchink the hose so that the restoration of love can flow unimpeded again in the system.
Wow.
So, and it's not about a technique that I have learned or anything like that. It's not that, if you were to do a constellation, I don't, as a facilitator, go in and say, I know now I'm going to heal your system, because that would be totally arrogant. And, I would be going in with my larger than life, going to sort your system out for you. Yeah. And it's so not that, because, say if somebody had an illness, sometimes it can really help. But I won't be going in to heal your illness, because who's to know that your illness isn't perfect for your soul's journey? But it may also, on the other hand, again, when we, in humility, just accept what's given or shown. It could be like a fish jumping out of the water. Yeah. It's just a glimpse given to us. And that glimpse can transform a total mindset, or it could turn a story upside down, and inside out. And for me, one huge joy is to see time and time again how everything is fundamentally about love. even if it's murder. And, it's fate. These two people, somebody had to be killed, obviously, because that's what happened. But very often the person who is murdered has no problem with being murdered because it was their fate. And once the energy begins to flow, and there might be fear initially and whatever, over time in the space, you will actually see these two people, the murderer and the victim, turn around and look into each other's eyes with love, and maybe even lie down together if they're both dead. And there's nothing but love. And that is just mind-blowing, and what a fucking leap.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful, and a lot of information there, and I'm sure it's a lot to take in as well, for people maybe just hearing about this for the first time. And I know where you're coming from as well, from having been to one of your workshops as well, and actually seeing a constellation happen and take place. Because like that, before I went, I'd absolutely no idea what happened, how it took place, what exactly was the family systems or the constellations. But there was something in me that was really curious that was coming up for me. Then how I even came across your workshop, it was just the time for me to go and explore, and absolutely fascinating work. Because like you say, there's no stories, there's no identities, there's no kind of woe me type scenarios like you mentioned. It's dealing with, well, I know for the likes of me, without going into details, something that came up and that was constellated, I was totally oblivious to. It had absolutely nothing to do with me and my direct personal life so far on this journey and this physical experience. It was from, an earlier generation, something that I had no idea about. And like you mentioned, there is that hole, that gap, that space, obviously, in this bigger ancestral family system energetic field. And by bringing that in again and acknowledging it, and even I suppose just to explain for people as well, in the constellation, say when it came to me, you had identified a number of people that maybe we should bring into the constellation. So I chose some people from the group to represent a number of different people within my family. And I sat outside. I wasn't a part of it initially. So I was the observer of what was going on. And you were asking different questions of different people. And there was a lady in there as well that was playing me, for want of a better word. And I was observing. And, you were asking her questions and she was, answering. And again, it's fascinating how it works, because all the individuals in the room as well have no idea. And I know when I was picked as well to take part in someone else's family constellation, I was a bit like, oh God, what do I do? But then when you're in it, like you say, you do get these downloads of whether a feeling or an emotion or something that kind of comes out of nowhere. That made no sense to me, but actually when I just spoke what came up, it made total sense for the person that was sitting there whose, system was showing up. It was fascinating to see what was going on, in my family system, and, to kind of, I suppose like you say, it's kind of filling in the gaps, it's closing the spaces or the holes that, well, like you mentioned as well, so the love can flow again.
Yes, and it gets underneath the radar, Karen. Yeah. Because as you said, you hadn't any idea about whatever it was that unfolded for you. But and also, we'll say if I talk about my own journey, I had my mother's mother died in childbirth.
Yeah.
Sorry, my mother's granny died in childbirth. We never spoke about that. It was never an issue. And when I was going to therapy, I never looked behind me. There was enough going on inside me and around me. I didn't ever want to look behind. I had enough to go with her, so I thought, my grandiose notions. But when I did my very first constellation, my grandmother was a dentist, and she was well able to go. She had 9 children, very intelligent and whatever. But it became apparent in that constellation that Granny was totally bewildered on a level, you know. And the facilitator said to me, "What happened here?" And I'd said, "I don't know." And then it dawned on me at some vague memory of my great granny dying in childbirth. So Granny had no mothering, and there was no power at all coming down the female line. And I could have gone to therapy for another 2 or 3 decades, and I'd have never thought to look behind. But I had one grandaunt who was told that she was going to be a nun, and she was never spoken of, Auntie Joyce. So Auntie Joyce was told, as I said, that she was going to be a nun, and she was sent off to the convent. And eventually she had they discovered that she had anorexia, probably before it was invented, you know, going back, way back, and was sent home to die of scruples. She died of scruples. It was written on her death cert that she had scruples. Yeah. But meanwhile, she had no bearing, or so it would appear, on my life. But yet, on my own journey, I had bulimia, anorexia, and I was an island of one, feeling totally isolated and insular because of my own making, how life appeared to me in my attempt to survive. So I had her feelings. So I felt totally isolated, and everything was my fault, which were actually her feelings. Her mother had died in childbirth. So when we did a piece of work one time on my Auntie Joyce and giving her a place in the family, 2 or 3 days later, my mother rang me and asked me if I'd been in touch with an aunt of mine, which I hadn't been. And because she got an email from her daughter sending her a photograph of Auntie Joyce, the first time we ever clapped eyes on her.
Oh my God, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, you know, so it's so hard we think, you know, in today's world, we can say, well, what's your 5-year plan? And I'm going here and I'm going there. And, you know, if the economy isn't good here, I'm going off to emigrate and I'm going to, you know, I'll prove that I'm something of value. We're part of a vast ocean of interconnectedness, you know, not just in our family, but it really brings us home to that truth.
Yeah, does show. And like I say, from having witnessed as well and been involved in a workshop, the interconnectedness and the entanglements as well, you know, like that we carry, that I carry, that every individual within the group, that you carry unconsciously, passed down, you know, through generations and generations, like you said, back in the days, from, you know, injustices, people left out, hardships, early death, being exiled from families, immigration, all these kind of things, they all still play a part and play out in our daily lives as well. And you mentioned at the very, you know, when you first started kind of talking about some of this work as well, you mentioned the word kind of traumas and stories and identities. And like that, we all have kind of different identities and, you know, pictures in our mind and our own stories that we create and different traumas that we've been through in our life. And that's part of our life as well. And it can be very isolating. You know, you use that word as well, isolating. And it can feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? And, you know, what am I doing wrong? And, you know, getting kind of just really blinkers on and that. Whereas the power of seeing this kind of work, and again, just in general, opening up our perspective and our consciousness and our curiosity and kind of seeing that there is more and exploring, because, oh my God, it's mind-blowing.
Well, up to that, Karen, I was busy analysing and rectimizing, excuse the pun, but it was with a magnifying glass, you know, at everything. And sure, I was going through layers and layers of bloody, you know, going round in circles. Whereas this is from the eagle's, the soul's perspective. You know, it is a vastness. And that gives us scope to reconnect with love. You know, otherwise it was it was hellish.
Yeah. And again, you know, absolutely. And again, you know, our journey is our journey. and each of our journeys is individual, and it's perfectly imperfect. You know, it is a certain way for ourselves as well, I believe, you know, but up until a point, we have to kind of pull ourselves out of it as well and wake ourselves up and be like, okay, I can't go on like this anymore. There has to be something else. I need to look to something bigger. And like, you know, again, from this work as well, it's a very real way as well for people, you know, because often people can think, you know, connecting with the universe and the higher force and energies and all these kind of things, it's a bit airy-fairy, and it can be difficult for people to grasp, even though neuroscience is backing it up. And if someone is so inclined and into research and facts like I am, you know, you can find it out for yourself and see actually, you know, biochemically in the body what happens when you do this kind of work. But it is difficult, and it is a journey to get to that point as well. But the likes of even something like this, it's just so accessible. And like you say, you don't need to have loads of information. And like that, my mind was blown as well by what showed up for me that I was totally oblivious to, you know, from generations past and that. And, you know, in other people's stories as well, because obviously there's healing in everyone's story, everyone's constellation. You know, you're getting healing, you're learning something. Well, I trust and believe anyway, that it's for the benefit of everyone in the group as well. And the higher energies and the collective kind of space and universal energies and consciousness as well. That this kind of work is so important.
And very often you'll find that on the day of the workshop, there'll be a general theme or two wherein all of these strangers have come together, and they're it's almost like they're missing links for one another. Their systems are missing links for one another, and the coming together creates such a powerful medium. You know, to produce the healing or the transformation together, you know, and the universe has decided what's happening more than anybody else.
Absolutely.
And the other great thing is that say if somebody was very traumatized, and do you remember when you said you were looking at your own constellation? That's what's happened. You choose the people, and then you sit down, and that's your work done, and then the work unfolds. But say if somebody was very traumatized, they can choose somebody else to be them, and the person who is them can maybe go to the very trauma that the actual client would not be able for, and it might not be anyway as traumatic for the representative to go to, because they don't have all the stories and the identifications of that specific trauma for them. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I found in my own journey that some of my deepest revelations have been in other people's constellations, that I've got a deeper insight into some of the issues in my own life from the privilege of representing somebody else in their constellation, because they will have chosen me very often because there's a resonance, an unconscious resonance with the person they want me to represent. Yeah. You know, that's why I say that's, you know, on the day there's magic, you know, that each one can come in as a fantastic representative for somebody else in the service of love. Yeah. You know.
Really was powerful, that. And I remember at one stage throughout the day, because it's you know, it's a full day. It's you know, like a full day workshop, and you get through as many kind of constellations as possible, because some of them might be short, some of them could be longer, some of them, I know workshop I was there towards the end, it was again mind-blowing, because there were so many unknowns and we were all kind of playing a part, and there was something obviously so hidden that we couldn't uncover. Yes. And, you know, different things playing out, and people not talking to people, and just different emotions and feelings going around the place. And there was like a secret, but the secret couldn't come out. And then eventually another family member was brought in, and another, and until it was all revealed. And it was just like, oh my God, it was, again, just so incredible what can happen in a space like that, and doing this kind of work. And again, the person whose constellation it was completely and utterly oblivious, had no idea at all that, you know, this had occurred and whatnot. So it's, again, it can be, I imagine, difficult at times, you know, to hear or to kind of uncover things like that. But again, so healing and kind of comforting, I think, in the knowing that all this has taken place and all this healing and kind of collective energy brought back together for all these people as well past.
Yeah. And again, one piece of work is operative in the field, the systemic field, for 1.5 to 2 years.
Oh, wow.
After that piece of work is done.
1.5
so
to
it
2
goes
years.
out.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Within,
you know.
And is that within each individual's family system, or just in general as well, in the whole kind of universal collective?
If I do a constellation today, that piece of work will be operative in my family system for up to 2 years, they say.
Wow. Oh, I'm so excited for my family system.
Yeah,
I honestly feel honoured and privileged that I have taken part in one of these and done this as well for my family and the greater family system. It
just ripples out, and it's not our business after it's done. It's like as if when you constellate your piece of work, in other words, constellate means you're picking people to, and you're placing them on the floor in relationship to one another. They're constellated. When you constellate somebody, that's the first time you've actually seen that map of relationship map. You know, when you place your representatives out on the floor, that's the first time you've seen them in relationship like that played out, or standing there in front of you. So it's like a jigsaw piece or a picture. And then the work is done from there. But at the end, when the entanglements are unravelled, and the love can begin to be manifest and flow again, at the end of the constellation, there's usually a much more positive picture wherein everybody is in their rightful place. So at the end of the picture, the person who's doing the constellation, they take that image with them. And it's an image that is operative in their psyche, in their soul or whatever. And they just take that wonderful image at the end where the love is tangible. And then they just let it go. So they don't have to bring it to therapy and figure out is anything happening, or they don't have to stick their oar into it, because just we're only tiny. Yes, trust and let it go.
The work is done, release, don't attach, just, like you say, let it go.
Because the first image has been running you for years. Do you know, it's been in the background running the show. So then the better image, or the healthier image at the end, is running the show. But it's brought some healing movement back into the system.
And that's
it's not really our business. Yeah,
and that's exactly what happened, you know, in everyone's constellation as well, like that you said, you know. And it's even funny the way people might be placed initially. And again, I know when I was doing it, I had no idea. You say just kind of feel your way around the room and wherever you want to place somebody, or whatever direction you want them facing, and this, that and the other, and you just do it without knowing. I was like, I don't even know, just here feels right. I turn this person this way, this person this way. But then when you as the facilitator come in, you know, you can, I suppose, from having done this work, you know, help identify a bit more, and like that they may be opposing each other, but then as the story unfolds and the meanings are uncovered, and you know why something happened, like you say, eventually it all comes back to love, and whether they're side by side and uniting again, and it's just beautiful. And it's something that as well, you know, a person can do several times, like, because I suppose there's probably so much stuff that it's not necessarily like, if I went and did another one, it may not necessarily be the same. Is that the way it works? Like, it could be something totally different, another entanglement.
Totally different.
Okay, yeah.
You could do it. You can do it for anything. You can do it for illness. You can do it for a relationship. You can do it for, do I emigrate or not? Or is this house for me? You can do it for anything, you know, virtually anything. And you know, and again, do you remember you were saying about that I think it was the last constellation we did, you know, there was a lot of secrets and whatever. So, and it's not, see, it's when I can relax and realize it's not up to me, none of it is up to me, there is no me doing anything, and I can stand in the just observing and in the, the not knowing, and that's the truth. We don't know, we haven't a clue, until we do. And if we're gifted that little fish jumping out of the water, to just catch a glimpse of it in our eye, and then honor that gift and see what happens when that gift is honored, and if there's a movement, and then just letting that unfold. And the great thing is that there's no judgment, because if I'm not raping and pillaging and incesting, in this lifetime, go back into my line. And it'll be in all our lines. If I had to deal with horrendous situations, I'd probably kill or whatever, for survival. So there's nothing, it's just experience. There's no judgment. And there's just such, it's funny, you get a group of strangers, and there might be 10, people might be unsure or tense at the beginning, but within 10 minutes, there seems to be no barriers, everybody. We get a sense, oh my gosh, we're all in this together, and we all need one another.
Absolutely.
So much,
That's
and
it.
it's such a,
That's exactly it. That's the power of sharing and holding space and being in these kind of scenarios with different people, that we just learn, and we're like, oh my God, we've all been through so much. And always will be, that is part of life. There will always be external things, thrown at us and curveballs. But again, it's about building the internal space and the resilience to grow through them and learn and kind of expand and connect into the bigger community and the bigger picture as well. And I love that you say, like, no judgment. And it's so important, not even in your line of work, I think in our daily lives as well. We honestly, like you say as well, we absolutely have no idea what is going on in any other person's life. And I think that's why not judging any other soul is so vital, because, you mentioned at the beginning, we all have identities. Like, at the end of the day, we all have identities. We all have characters. We all have masks that we project to the world to try fit in and look normal. And we keep, the best part of ourselves often hidden. And that's why, just the whole non-judgment thing is just so huge for me. I'm like, please just don't do it. And if people wanted to, I suppose maybe since you mentioned the word, if, people wanted to start building a space within themselves, or to try get out of that thinking mind, that over analytical kind of critical mind that we all have as well, and try build a more compassionate idea for themselves and to kind of not judge others. Do you have any tips or advice on how people can start to build that kind of a practice? Or I suppose, it's probably obviously in part of your work, but in people's daily lives as well, connecting back to that true nature and that true essence in our soul within all of us.
Well, Karen, going back again to my own journey, I was terrified of people, and I was an island of one, and I think I would have 2 or 3 tried and tested friends, that I would have let near me, and I trusted animals. And so I kept myself very much to myself, and so that has been my journey up to about 55 years, I'd say.
Wow.
And I'm 60 now. So
that does not come across at all in your conversations and in your workshops and that.
Well, that's my truth. That's my truth. And so my motto was, over and out. Let me get the feck out of here. It was too feckin' painful, and I was my own jailer, and executioner. But so that was the truth of where I came from, despite years and years and years of kanga hammering through the granite around my heart. I couldn't even know where my heart was at. I knew where my solar plexus was, but I'd have to put my hand on my heart. I was traumatized out of my tree. And so for me, and I think shame was my main identity. So who I was wrong. So for me, the meditation, well, first off, it was the family constellations gave me a much wider perspective. And it gave me the proof that I wasn't imagining, what I was going, that I wasn't mad. And that was a relief. But it then, and it was always terrifying for me because, when I had a huge judge, I imploded with my own rage internalized against myself. So that began to soften when the wider scope and the broader traumas in the line, became apparent to me. But the meditation began to very, very gently. It began to bring me back into my body and began to give me space from the thoughts that were torturing me on that. It was like there was a hamster on coke on a wheel in my head, perpetually in motion. So the meditation began to give me just a focus and relief, and I suppose the one that I hated most was myself. So to begin to have compassion for my inner child and for myself, that was massive. That began to soften my cough. But the unraveling of the systemic entanglements. You see, when we become entangled, we take on, as children, the pain or suffering that the system isn't able to take on at the time. So, say if people aren't able to really grieve and let their grief go, pass through it, a child might take on the grief or take on the guilt or the shame. That's not being owned in the system. And then they become identified with that. And as a result, then they become bigger than their parents and thus bigger than life. So they're larger than life. Then they say this shouldn't have happened, or that shouldn't have happened, or leave it to me, I'll sort it. You start, when we're entangled, we become bigger than our parents, and the river, instead of going down to the ocean, it starts to go back up the mountain. Okay. So we're starting to feed the ones behind us, are get embroiled in other people, in other systems and whatever. So when we hand back the entanglements, we become small, and we begin to take up our own rightful, unique place in the system. So if I had a stillborn sister or brother before me, and the pain of that was too big for my parents, so they never spoke about that person. I might have been told I was the eldest. And in fact, I'm not. I'm the second. So I would have been in the wrong place, always feeling out of things, looking for my own place. So this brings me back so that I can begin to settle. And when I hand back the entanglements, the pain of my parents, or the ones before me, my Auntie Joyce or whoever, back to them, with deep respect, then I can pick up my own trauma. Because if I'm entangled in their pain, who the hell will have felt my own? Not me. And that's where my children come in. I don't have children, but if I did have children, I might do the exact opposite to what was done to me in my childhood, or I might become hyper vigilant if I was, if there was something, I might be hyper vigilant around them and make sure nobody ever looks sideways at them. And that's exactly how the entanglements gets passed down. And then it gets passed on from generation to generation, and nobody's at home to themselves. So this work helps us to hand back the pain and then pick up our own pain and come into ourselves, come into our home, to our own body.
Yes.
And just be small, always be small in relation to our parents and the giant ancestors behind us. But we, in turn, will always be big in relation to our children.
Yeah.
But meditation, I find I still do that every day. Being able to just sit.
Yeah.
And, that's been a great blessing. And
how does your own practice, personal meditation practice look? Do you often have music or no music or nature or guided or just kind of sit and be present? Or
I sit and be present, and sometimes I just have a gong. I might do something from YouTube with just a gong, and I think that helps me, because I would have always been a sponge, absorbing the stuff around me. And sometimes I might notice that I'm not going in to do. I'm not very methodical. I don't do everything I'm not very systemic. Systematic in the timing or whatever. I do it most days, but it's not from a specific time to a specific time. I might notice that I'm kind of avoiding it, and then when I go in, I might notice that, gosh, tears are flowing. Now, at this stage, I'm not even identifying with them. I'm not going, oh my God, what's that? I thought of that healed. I don't give a damn, because it mightn't even be mine.
Exactly.
Something I've been absorbing from my clients or people around me. It doesn't matter. If I need to know, I will know. But it's not happening to anyone. I'm not there sort of, before I'd have gone, oh my God, I'd have to fix it and sort it and analyze it. And now it's just a joy just to not be identified with it, and
surrender, let it flow.
And then you're back again in presence and in connection. Connection is the big thing. Yeah, connection, communion, connection.
That's
vital.
Yeah, they say for human survival as well. So obviously, from your story that you shared, from being terrified of people and completely isolating yourself to saying how vital connection is, I think that shows a big coming of a full circle.
Total. And again, Karen, I am so grateful. I wouldn't like to repeat any of it, really.
Yeah.
But it is such a privilege and a joy to experience the contrast in my 60s before I kick my clogs. Oh my God.
I can imagine.
It's just, I cannot. It's like I was so traumatized I didn't have the childhood, but I'm having it now.
Well, great. Doesn't matter when it happens, as long as it happens. You'll enjoy it even more so now. This is your time to let your inner child shine clearly, because like that, there is no time, and that's another constructed reality of things have to be done at this stage and feel the pressure of, conforming and ticking boxes of how life should be. And that's not the way life is at all. It's individual for every single person. Everyone's on their own journey. Everyone's in their own process. And where everyone is meant to be is exactly where they're meant to be right now. Although it may be crap and it may not be where you want to be, it is part of the journey. And that was my own story as well, and I'm grateful that I pulled myself out now at this stage and got that wider perspective and just can see, oh my God, Karen, like you say, we're our own worst enemies. And the only one putting limits on myself was me. With different things I was carrying. And just once you start to look and get curious and see and release and let go and open up to the bigger picture and make that higher connection, you're like, oh my God, in one sense it was all perfect. It was absolutely, I couldn't have planned it better myself. And that's kind of how you have to and eventually a sense of humor does come in. You just kind of have to laugh. And it's hard to laugh when you're in it. And, for anyone who is in the depths of their journey going, oh my God, those two are crazy or whatnot. It's only because I think we can relate and can know how it goes. And having seen it through and come out the other side, it's definitely magical.
Well, Karen, I think that for me, I never grew in the light. I grew in the dark.
Everything does. Think about it. Any seeds, any trees, any everything, they're underground for so long. They're been trodden on, darkness, damp. That's what they need. And then all of a sudden, pop, they bloom, they come out. And we're all the same.
I wasn't meant to be a snowdrop or a daffodil, so I'd be lucky at being a Christmas cactus.
Sure, that's just as beautiful. Yeah, but that's exactly it. I think, most of us, we do flirt. We need the darkness to see the light. Not many see the faith in the light. Often it's the deep dark night of the soul that we need to go through. Well, Edel, that's just been such a fascinating conversation. The time has just flown by, and really informative, and thank you so much for joining me. And I know soul work is your passion, and this work is your passion. You can hear it in your voice. I don't know if you have any parting words or advice on, how people can begin to access their own soul, or we've pretty much covered it all.
We've covered it all, and it's to know. Do you know when you said there that the perfection, everything is perfect, and for me, what's coming back to true nature and coming back to the surrendering to the life that is living me, rather than Edel trying to perfect herself or trying to be somebody else. It's literally surrendering into who I am and allowing life to come in and live me, rather than from my ego or from my lack of self-worth, my self-hatred, trying to be somebody else that would be lovable or would be deserving of something. No matter, I could do that for another 50 lifetimes and it would never be anything on what life has actually made if I get out of my own way and surrender to our natural selves. And that's, in a workshop, you just see everybody. It is, sometimes it's hard, but it's great love and great laughter as well as tears. But you see the transformation. People who might come in, like I would have been stony faced and granite. That's how I would have been. And you can see that melt. You can see people and their beauty begin to come out. And people who might have had harsh parents or who are appeared to be unavailable, when you see those parents unravel and disentangle from what they were holding and their traumas, you actually see them transformed, and the harshness was actually their entangled love, as blind love of children taking on what wasn't there out of love, and they were so embroiled in that and overwhelmed in that their love couldn't flow. And that's why they're not available or appear to not be available for us. But once we begin to see where they were coming from and what they were holding, oh my God, phenomenal. So all we are, no matter what we appear, no matter what guise, it is love, and it's not a concept. When we actually live in the cold front of it all, it becomes apparent. The greenhouse warming is there happening to us all. As we come back into our hearts, and our natural selves are free just to be. Yes, so true. And surrender. And like you say, it's absolutely, I know for me, it's difficult, as in it's so bloody scary because it's unknown. You don't know what's going to be on the other side, and your mind will make it out to be the most scariest thing. Don't do it. It could be this, that, and the other, whatever. And that's the way our mind is programmed to work, to keep us safe. But it's absolutely nothing like what our mind makes it out to be. And like you say, it is just the flow of love and compassion and that space. Surrender and allow life to live us. That's beautiful. I love it. Edel, I will share your links as well in the show notes, but if people wanted to follow you, where's the best place for people to connect with you? Probably on my Facebook page. Yeah. And Karen, thank you so much for making it so easy. Well, it's not all down to me. Thank you just so much. And it was a joy having you, the other day. So thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe and share the podcast on iTunes, Spotify or Stitcher. Also log on to www.karenmaloney.wellbeing.com and click podcasts for the full show notes and links.